Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to the May 24th, 2022 Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I will turn it over to John Weiss to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith. Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi. And Commissioner Shamir Barron. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right, great. Thank you. And again, welcome to the May 24th public hearing and public meeting. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to testify on any of the public hearing items, you may do so by going to our website and looking at the estimated time for that item and joining the webinar at that time. If you would like to just watch the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel. And we have a long day today. We will begin the morning with a public meeting, which has 3 items on the agenda. 2 are items that were read into the record last week, and we will be opening the hearing today so that the applicants can present today and we can take public testimony. The second public meeting item is an item that has already had a public hearing and for which we've already heard testimony and given comments to the applicant, and they are returning today with a revised proposal in response to those comments. And then we will begin our public hearing agenda. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through both agendas today.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. So as stated, we'll start today's Preservation Department public meeting agenda with items 1 and 2. These are being presented together, so I'll read them both in right now. First, item 1, LPC 21-10627, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 858, Lot 1, 251 and 253 Fifth Avenue in the Madison Square North Historic District. This is a Queen Anne style French flats building with ground floor stores designed by George B. Post, built in 1872 to 74, and a store and office building designed by Charles C. Thane and built in 1920. This application is to restore missing architectural features, modify storefronts, install a marquee, install a skylight at number 253, and to demolish number 251 and construct a new building on the site connected to number 253. The second application, item number 2, is LPC 22-02343, Borough of Manhattan, Block 858, Lot 1, and this pertains to 251 Fifth Avenue, which I previously described. It's an application for a modification of use and bulk. That application is to request that the Landmarks Preservation Commission issue a report to the City Planning Commission relating to an application for a modification of bulk pursuant to Section 74-711 of the zoning resolution. And as noted, this was read into the record just last week on May 17th, and it's being presented today for the first time.
Hey, Commissioner Sweet. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Go ahead, Abby, but I just wanted to open up the hearing before the applicants speak, but I'll let you go ahead and transfer it.
Okay, they have entered the hearing. They just need to click on their screen and unmute yourselves. And then you can state your name for the record when Sarah opens the hearing.
Great, thank you, Abby. All right, so Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is open and the applicants may begin.
Good morning. My name is Caterina Roiatti. Together with Robert Rabosch and Winston Wolf, we represent here Studio, the architects for a proposal. With us are also Fred Becker, Owners Counsel, and Isaac Obel-Shalom, whose family has owned 251 and 253 Fifth Avenue for many decades. This proposal entails the restoration of 251 Fifth Avenue as per the 711 restrictive declaration and the replacement of the existing 253 Fifth Avenue building with a new mixed-use building. On the 253 Fifth Avenue lot, the careful analysis of the buildings in the historic district provided justification for a taller building without a front setback. Also, given the limited width of the site, a small encroachment over the historic building was deemed appropriate. As part of the declaration, we are asking for modifications for bulk only to propose a straight street wall and a small encroachment. The site is located on the edges of the Madison Square North Historic District in the middle of a very dense area. It comprises 2 buildings on a merged corner lot. The 251-253 site is urbanistically significant. The buildings will enjoy direct sight lines from the Empire State Building and the Flatiron. The historic landmarks will be visible from both and just as originally intended, directly from the park. A neighborhood of exceptions. The Madison Square Park North District is a neighborhood marked by the exceptions to the grid generated by the Broadway corridor, as well as by architectural exceptions, diversified typologies, and a vast collection of styles, materials, and scales. Buildings range from 3 to 28 stories in height, all attesting to the successive development phases. The Madison Square District is not new to sculpture forms. It is in fact anchored on the south by the very sculptural Flatiron Building and to the north by the Empire State Building. The diversified character of the context, as illustrated in the following streetscape panoramas, could not be more visible than in the area surrounding the site, where the exception is the rule. The intersection of Fifth Avenue and 28th Street is not a site where appropriateness calls for a design that recedes. Excerpts from the LPC designation report. 251 Fifth Avenue, built in 1872, is one of the earliest surviving apartment buildings intended to attract mostly single men. It was designed in Queen Anne style by George B. Post. As described in the Landmarks Preservation Commission designation report, it originally featured a pyramidal crown with dormer windows that would have been visible from Madison Square Park. The turret, which we propose to restore and partially replicate, retained its role as the landmark in between much taller structures until its removal at the end of the 30s. 253 Fifth Avenue. The repurposing of 253 from townhouse to commercial use gradually stripped the building of any historic fabric, so much so that it is described as no style in the condition report. The deterioration was later accelerated by conjoining the 2 structures into a hybrid commercial loft complex. The 253 Fifth Avenue existing building is not a building for which the Madison Square North Historic District was designated, and therefore its demolition will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the historic district. Instead, together with the restoration of 253, the new building will regenerate and further enhance the integrity of the district in a manner responsible to the surroundings and the neighborhood's rich history. Current views of the site. The unpredictable streetscape surrounding the site is a collection of diversified typologies, styles, and scales. The very tall 261 and 243 Fifth Avenue dominate the east side of 5th and 28th. The close-up view of the corner site illustrates the unique prominence and visibility of the corner location. The history of 251 and 253 Fifth Avenue reflects the neighborhood loss of heritage that followed the repurposing of most buildings in the district. The recent influx of residential conversions and new buildings has and continues to bring a new vibrancy to the district, The proposed restoration and new building will greatly contribute to the transformation. 251 Fifth Avenue, existing conditions. 251 maintains enough of the original fabric to make the restoration both possible and necessary. The survey of the current conditions and close-up catalog of the surviving details and elements will follow. Panorama of 28th Street looking north, moving from left to right. The street elevation shows the fragmentation of the district. After the diminutive Timpanelli buildings, a tower rises at Broadway, then the district starts with the grouping of short buildings flanked by a tall one. It is interrupted again by the hotel parking, followed by the tower, to culminate in the McKim Mid and White building. On the other side of Fifth Avenue, the district ends with our site and a tall loft building, before the void created by the plaza of a modern high-rise. Panorama east side of Fifth. Moving left to right, again, a wide variety of scales and styles is present, but the grouping is dominated by the muscular, very tall Art Deco buildings. The statement, which was discussed at the CB5 meeting, that historic buildings have a tripartite geometry simply does not apply to this stretch of Fifth Avenue. An example of a tripartite facade can be seen at 218 Fifth Avenue. It will be shown on page 12 later. The Art Deco towers at 261 and 243 Fifth, and even the more recent 241, have no top. Rather than crown, the top floors fragment into interlocking and overlapping dormers. The future mansard roof of 251 Fifth Avenue will also add to this reading. The overall heights of the block, the overall heights of 261 and 243 Fifth has been further augmented by the recent addition of the 20 stories high 241 Fifth Avenue. Panorama west side of Fifth. Obviously, this is not our side of the avenue, but it's interesting because all heights are represented. Again, the balance of tall buildings has been augmented by the recent introduction of the 21 stories high 250 Fifth Avenue Hotel Tower. The McKim Mid and White building brings a palette of luminous, lighter, and more rarefied details and materials to the area. Introduction that we took into consideration for our proposal. Heights comparison of buildings in the historic district. The careful analysis of the existing tall buildings in the district enable us to build a strong rationale for proposing a taller building on the 253 Fifth Avenue portion of the site. The heights of the proposed building will fit in with a variety of heights found throughout the historic district, which reach 28 stories in height. The proposed development, comprised of a tall tower and a lower building, is in harmony with the massing of the buildings in the district. Tall buildings in the historic district. All the tall buildings in the historic district have strong street wall, rising without a lower setback. Surrounding development. The zoning mechanism which is applicable on a wide street is the tower on a base. This massing does not exist in the district. It is essentially a modern approach based on requiring setback at the lower levels. The developments in the surrounding area that apply the zoning massing have not been successful, says 309 Fifth Avenue at the bottom right of the page. Important to notice that the views from our site to the Empire State Building have been preserved through the forest of tall buildings that have been built or will be soon built. Robert?
Hi, my name is Bob Trebosha. I'm going to go through the 253 new building. Significant architectural references. The images show the stepped tops of buildings surrounding the site. These buildings do not have a top, rather overlapping dormers. The 261 29th Street facade is marked by degrading and overlapping terracotta cornices, which we found very inspiring. The sidewalls, unlike in other districts, are characterized by regular spaced grouped windows, not dissimilar in size from the front facade windows. Below are images of several side walls, which were intentionally designed and even decorated with terracotta details, clearly indicating that the expectation was that they would remain unobstructed and visible. A curious image of vertical dormers, although located just outside the district, talks about the imaginative ways side walls were treated in the area. Significant architectural references. A survey of the decorative spandrels in the area, often characterized by abstract motifs. The materiality includes masonry, terracotta, and stone, all in a subdued palette. The monochromatic facade at 250 Fifth Avenue brings a new, refined, and luminous aesthetic to the area. Historical and proposed building view. The intent of the authenticity of the restoration is demonstrated by the two images, 1905 and proposed side by side. The urbanistic relevance of the prominent corner site will be renewed. Strategic massing. The R10 zoning allows, with inclusionary housing, a maximum of 12 FAR, 89,100 square feet plus mechanical deductions. The zoning mechanism, which is applicable to a wide street, is a tower on a base. The massing does not exist in the district. It is essential a modern approach based on requiring a setback at the lower levels. The developments in the surrounding area that applied this zoning massing have not been successful. The design of 253 Fifth Avenue was guided by the idea that the air parcel above the historic structure contains DNA data to inform the design of the new building. In particular, the slopes that define the pyramidal crowns and the mansard roof extend and sculpt the new structure, tying 253 and 251 Fifth Avenue into an integrated whole. The uneven grid and controlled asymmetry of 251 extends through the 253 facade. The old and new building are obviously different in scale, but they are indeed in harmony. Within the slope plains, 253 Fifth Avenue sculpts itself into a form that is at once innovative and reminiscent of the mansard roofs and step setbacks found in the area. The proposed building is in alignment and at scale with the streetscapes. Building facts. The proposal entails a full restoration of 251 Fifth Avenue as per the 74-711 mechanism that offers to request a variance for the proposed new building for bulk only. TRA proposes the replacement of 253 Fifth Avenue with a mixed-use building whose massing reinforces the street wall. A small encroachment is proposed on the north side of 251 Fifth Avenue. The first 3 floors are commercial with residential above. Approximately 88 apartments are proposed, of which 30% will be affordable housing units. These units will be interspersed throughout the building, bringing much needed apartments to an area that was, before becoming a commercial and manufacturing, a vibrant residential neighborhood. This is certainly an area that can support the additional density and benefit from the introduction of the additional residential units, which include an affordable housing component. Floor plans. The elevator is moved away from the historic building, minimizing the impact of the adjacent historic building. This somewhat unusual move also allowed for very efficient layouts that take full advantage of the south wall legal light and air. The balance of the party wall between the two buildings is maintained at the lower commercial levels. The small encroachment of about 6'6" demonstrated to be necessary to create a variety of apartment sizes, with the smaller studios located in the narrower sections of the building. Cantilever precedence. The site of the new building is only 24 foot 9 inches wide. Early in the design process, it was understood that a small encroachment over the historic structure could be considered. A review of past approvals demonstrates that in the past, several buildings with rather large cantilevers have been approved in the historic districts. 251 and 253 Fifth Avenue elevations. Although the Fifth Avenue and 28th Street facade share the same materials and similar language, they respond to different conditions, are intentionally different. The Fifth Avenue facade base is in alignment with the street wall of the adjacent buildings. It is characterized by large windows that mark the commercial use, set within strong mortar set terracotta tiles. The facade dematerializes on the upper floors into smaller windows and glistening shaped terracotta tiles. The top is stepped similarly to the other tall buildings on the stretch of Fifth Avenue. The design of the south wall, which takes full advantage of the available legal light and air, recognizes that since 251 Fifth Avenue can never expand vertically, it is not just a demising wall, but rather a facade. Similar historic examples are referenced in the presentation. On the 28th Street side, the window wall rises into a large dormer, a gesture similar to the top dormers of the adjacent building. It also shifts the weight of the building away from Fifth Avenue main facade. The modular organization of the facade, which taken from the Queen Anne style 251 facade, is regular, but not exactly asymmetrical, but within a center axis. And muted palette is chosen both to harmonize with the masonry surrounding buildings and to provide a backdrop to a vibrantly colored historic building, enhancing its significance. Panoramas of the proposed design within the streetscape. The regeneration of the historic landmark is a statement of urban regeneration. The full restoration of 251 Fifth Avenue will restore and repair the layers of history and bring a renewed significance to the building, the block, and the district. 253 Fifth Avenue confronts the challenge of producing thoughtful contemporary architecture. The new tower embraces the district's eclectic characteristics, respectfully standing out while improving the presence and significance of the historic landmark. Rendering view looking north. The corner site provides ample justification for the bold transformation of both 251 and 253. Together, they celebrate the historic grandness of form and the extravagance of the diverse neighborhood context. Traditional materials are used to create a new form. The design finds connections, not replication. The architectural assembly and composition of the new building's facade weaves together and celebrates the varied forms of architectural expression in the district. The somewhat uneven grid, the surprisingly slightly asymmetrical geometry of the historic building, and the variety of recesses guide the design of the new building. The geometry and materiality of Fifth Avenue facade fits within the streetscape of the particular stretch of Fifth Avenue. The base extends vertically along with the other tall historic buildings in the district. The windows progressively decrease in height following the change of use from the commercial to residential. The grouped windows on the 28th Street facade are seen against and are sympathetic in scale to the regularly spaced tripartite windows that puncture the side walls of buildings on the same block. The depth also is typical of all the buildings in the area, but particularly of 251, where the windows will be, after restored, once again recessed within the replicated cast iron lintels and colonnettes. In regard to the design of the south wall, the meeting at CB5 brought a valuable perspective. It was observed that the new building was too contrasty, which made us give more consideration to the reference provided at the opposite side of the street by McKim-Mead and White Building. The formal classical landmark inspired a more luminous, calmer palette and more soothing and restrained presence. The modular monochromatic window wall provides an appropriate backdrop for the brightly colored eccentric roofs below. 253 Fifth Avenue, window wall close-up. The Fifth Avenue strong base establishes a clear hierarchy between the primary and secondary facade. In contrast to the flat mortar set tiles that clad the base, the secondary facade seen here is clad with shaped, multi-layered glazed terracotta panels, whose extruded forms recalls the scoring and abstract patterns found on masonry buildings located throughout the district. 253 Fifth Avenue, close-up of 28th Street window wall. The residential floors fenestrations is characterized by grouped windows. The abstract decoration, which creates an interwoven effect at once repetitive and varied, is obtained through restrained gestures. Only one extruded glazed terracotta panel and one type of unglazed flat terracotta panel tiles are utilized to produce a facade evocative of the historic detailing, maintaining contemporary and timeless expression. 253 Fifth Avenue, close-up rendering materiality. The modular organization of the facade and the muted palette is chosen both to harmonize with the masonry surrounding buildings and to provide a backdrop to the vibrantly colored historic building, enhancing its significance. 253 Fifth Avenue, close-up of 28th Street window wall upper floors. The 28th Street facade extends into what can be called a larger dormer. Similarly to the Con Building 261 on the same block, note that the mechanical volumes are minimal. We took advantage of the oddly shaped dog leg lot to locate the mechanical volumes away from the main facade. North facade elevation. The fully visible lot line wall on the north side of the building is marked by windows turning the corner, similarly to how in the historic buildings, the piers of the main facade turned on the side wall. The Empire State Building views have been miraculously preserved through the many new developments underway. The recessed line of windows, which marks the elevator lobbies, recalls the light well seen in the area. North facade rendering. You can see the facade turning the corner to capture the Empire State views. The recessed line of windows similar to the light well seen in the area. The balance of this clearly secondary facade, as typical in the area, is clad in sand-colored bricks.
Restoration of the 251 Fifth Avenue building. Historic Timeline District. The history, culture, and changes in the architectural landscape are reflected in the history of 251 and 253 Fifth Avenue. The image on the top shows the district as seen from the park in 1898. The flamboyant sculptural rooftops were meant to be seen from Madison Square Park. The image below, which dates from the late 30s, shows the 251 Fifth Avenue, even when surrounded by massive structures, remained recognizable as a landmark. History of the building. On the left is an article by Christopher Gray describing the early life of the building as an apartment for single men coming to New York City to find their fortune and enjoy the entertainment district. The building was originally developed and occupied by Black, Star, and Frost Jeweler. The top right image shows the ground floor interior as it was at the time. On the lower right is an article from the New York Times from 1897, which reported that elevator details were being stolen for a long time. Nobody noticed the theft for some time because the interior was so embellished. Evolution timeline. The first image shows the original design of the building. The second image shows the first modernization of the building, when the lower levels were repurposed for commercial showroom use. The main floor and roofs were still in the original condition. The Landmarks Preservation Commission stated that the authenticity of the restoration should replicate as close as possible the conditions of the 1905 photograph. In 1907, the mansard roof was removed, but the turret remained. The upper floor windows have been modernized. Evolution timeline continues. The 1980 image, which is the third row, shows the condition pretty much of the building as they are today. The last image is from a 3D scan, which was the tool we used to document the existing building. The 1905 image that guided our proposal. This image went viral at the time. It was often reproduced in postcards, in a way, the predecessor to Instagram. Existing fabric to remain. As we said before, there are enough surviving elements to make the restoration not only possible, but necessary. Many architectural elements were cast iron or sheet metal catalog elements, and as such, easily replicated. The brick and stone elements are in very good condition. Existing fabric to remain. The documentation of existing elements continues on this page and includes the brick cleaning, which you see at the bottom right, which shows that the bricks remain in very good condition. Material analysis. Differing wall textures and mixed media materials are typical of the period and of this style of buildings. Currently, everything's coated in paint. The probing via boom allowed us to catalog the pieces as shown in this page. Mapping of the original surviving elements. Preservation always requires us to choose what to keep and what should go. This is our mapping of the facade, guided again by the intent to adhere to the 1905 image. Proposed restoration. The original storefront, which was transformed in 1905 following the repurposing to commercial use, comprises the first mezzanine and second floor. The storefront seen in the reference image shows large expanses of glass, a feature that is recognized in the restoration. The details of the new infill are in kind with the surviving elements. On the third and fourth floor, the original tripartite windows, still visible in the 1905 photos, have been soon after gutted to allow for more visibility to the commercial spaces behind. The proposed restoration entails the restoration of the cast iron lintels and wood double-hung windows, as seen in the 1905 photograph, with the detail and depth of the windows assemblies. The restoration also recognizes the urbanistic significance of reproposing the reconstruction of the rooftop elements in natural slate roof. A long metal and glass skylight now visible from the public ways gives light to the loft apartments below and conceals the rooftop railing and recreation terrace behind. Materiality paint analysis. The original red brick facade, brownstone and bluestone cornices will be returned to the original unpainted state. The contrasting proposed paint colors are based on the careful microscopic paint analysis. Close-up of storefront elevations. The storefronts seen in this side-by-side close-up view show that the new and the historic storefronts find the dialogue. They share natural materials and scale. The proposal provides handicaps accessible entrance to the historic building, Currently, the retail is located approximately 48 inches below the sidewalk. Axonometric views of both storefronts. The geometry of the new storefront of 253 is in alignment with the historic storefront at 251. 28th Street storefront of 251. To provide handicap accessibility, the entrance lintel had to be raised. Existing elements are to be reused and any new elements will be replicated in kind. Storefront mullions will be painted wood. Storefront details. The storefront occupies the first floor, mezzanine, and second floor. The storefront seen in the 1905 reference image shows large expanses of glass, as we said, a feature that, our meetings with the staff indicated needed to be recognized in the restorations. The details of the new infill are in kind with the surviving element. Marquee, these are precedents in the historic districts. Marquees are often seen in hospitality. Residential is a related use. The introduction of a grand marquee to mark the entrance to the residential building is appropriate. Axonometric marquee detailed view. The integration of the marquee brings functionality to the historic storefront. The modern design is simple and strikes a balance between the historic and the new use of the storefront. Marquee details. The proposal includes concealed minimal perimeter lighting. Residential floors. The third and fourth floor facade seen here of the two buildings side by side shows that the new and historic storefront, these are windows, no storefronts, find the dialogue. They share depths of fenestration, natural materials, and scales. Residential window detail, this is of course 251. The introduction of the cast iron lintel and columnettes that had been gutted to allow for showroom windows is reproposed. They are being replicated. They will be replicated in kind. The windows, as we said, will be wood double hung. Painted in the original is a black-green color. Railing. The memory of the railing sockets in the blue stone cornice are still visible. This enabled the modulation of the railing to be exactly determined in order to replicate the railing in kind. Axonometric view of the turret reconstructed. The mansard, turret, and flat roof are to be reconstructed as per the 1905 condition documented in the photographs. The window wall of the new building recedes at the roof level to recognize the turret. Oculus details of the turret. The probes uncovered several architectural details in blue stone. Blue stone was used where structural considerations were a concern. The proposed design leaves the blue stone in its natural state. Skylight. A metal and glass skylight now visible from the public way gives light to the loft apartments below and conceals the rooftop railing and recreation terrace behind. Visibility of the skylight. The study shows that the skylight is minimally visible from the public ways. Ocular windows. Reconstructed ocular windows and surrounding are to be replicated. The windows will be operable and pivoting, and of course, wood. Connection between 251 and 253. The reconstructed Fifth Avenue mansard roof, which you can see in between the two buildings, reaches up to establish a dialogue between the historic and new elements. Dormer details. The reconstructed dormer and surroundings are to be replicated. The dormers will receive operable double-hung wood windows.
251 and 253 together, two buildings as partners. Materiality. The historic building restoration is informed by the existing materials and paint analysis. They include bluestone, brownstone, brick, wood, cast iron, galvanized metal, and slate. Most materials would be left in their natural state. The materials proposed for the new building are historically used in the district. They include terracotta brick, stone, and metal. View looking north. The new building is both appropriate and harmonious within the architectural landscape and provides a setting for the historic building. Fifth Avenue elevation view. The new building is in scale with the surrounding buildings. The reconstructed turret has a clear silhouette will remain clear against the skyline. View looking south. The Fifth Avenue facade reinforces the street wall. The recessed windows at the lot line wall mark the elevator lobby, recalls the light wells of buildings in the district. Fifth Avenue storefronts. The natural materials and scale harmonizes with the street experience. The 28th Street storefront. The marquee differentiates the residential entrance from the commercial storefront bays. Views of the mansard roof. The new building provides an appropriate setting for the vibrantly colored historic structure. The detail and depth of the new window assemblies reference the richness of details in the historic building. The restored turret. A close-up view of the turret highlights the sculptural form of the reconstructed historic building. Rendering. Significance in the streetscape. Vista up Fifth Avenue with views of the Empire State Building. The regeneration of 251 Fifth Avenue is a statement of urban regeneration. 253 Fifth Avenue enhances the presence and significance of the corner site and historic landmark. Together, the new and historic buildings add to the public realm. Thank you.
Thank you.
For it.
Thank you very much for the thorough presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions about the restoration work or the new building? All right, I'm not seeing any questions at this time, so why don't we move to public testimony, and we may have more questions after that. So if you're a member of the public and are in this meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. We will, as always, start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. But whether or not you signed up, please raise that virtual hand so we can locate you. And I will turn it over to our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Sonia Gior, to take us through the testimony.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So we have one sign up in advance, and that is George Calderaro. So George, I'll be moving you into the meeting as a panelist. And I see that you're in the meeting, so you should be able to unmute yourself. And if you could please state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. I'm delighted to be with you on Queen Victoria's 203rd birthday. For this application, I'm also representing the 29th Street Neighborhood Association and the Tin Pan Alley American Popular Music Project, which I direct, two organizations working to preserve the distinctive historic character of Lower Fifth Avenue and surrounding area. We're pleased to note that this building is across the street from the magnificent McKim, Mead & White building at 250 Fifth Avenue, which is being beautifully transformed into a new iteration of the famed Fifth Avenue Hotel. These restoration projects are exactly what's needed and have been lacking in this distinguished stretch of Fifth Avenue, which has suffered losses of many designation-worthy buildings that are now years-old vacant lots. We urge the Commission to review the 29th Street Neighborhood Association proposal for an expansion of the Madison Square North Historic District. The Victorian Society's initial enthusiasm for this project at 251 Fifth Avenue has tempered following a more in-depth look. The proposed restoration of the upper floors of number 251 appears to be well done and would be a significant improvement to the building and the district. But it's important to understand that the proposed design of the building doesn't match any historic period. The corner tower and mansard roof never existed at the same time as the three-story commercial base with large show windows. In addition, the proposed design further reduces the height of the level that was original for first floor by extending the height of the street floor, the original basement. The 1920 changes, while reducing somewhat the height of the first floor, maintained its primacy as the tallest floor on the facade, and even included projecting windows at the two corner bays, recalling the large projecting corner windows of the original 1872 design. The proposed restoration further alters the historic design of the building by reducing even more the height of the original first floor and eliminating the remaining projecting bay windows, the last remnant of the original design at this level. We question whether this satisfies the preservation purpose required by section 74.711 of the zoning resolution. We do not object to the demolition of number 253, as we find that this completely altered building listed as no style in the designation report contributes little to the character of the historic district. This support for demolition is reluctantly given, however, because were this building restored to its 1920 appearance, a very feasible option, we believe it would be a contributing building. It would fit nicely into the eclectic architectural character of the district. Regarding the proposed replacement building for number 253, the height is appropriate given the variation of building heights in this district and in the immediate vicinity. However, we find the building's design needs substantial revision. We're unpersuaded that the basing design elements of the new building on highly abstracted features of this historic neighbor at 251. We believe these references will be largely imperceptible, yet they result in a new building that appears to be an exercise in contortion and does not result in the harmonious relationship required by section 74.711. A new building with traditional rectilinear features of base, shaft, and crown with well-proportioned details is what's needed to fit the context and not call attention to itself. At the least, the bulge and angled window bays should be eliminated. They have no basis in historic buildings in this district or any historic district of which we are aware. Thank you.
Thank you. Now our next speaker will be Helen Freeman of the Historic Districts Council. Helen, I'll be promoting you to panelist. And I see that you're now in the meeting, so if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, this is Helen Freeman of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is cautiously appreciative of the proposed restoration of the 251 building, and we recognize the horse trade that is being attempted here. We find the proposed new building to be entirely too busy, both in terms of massing and facade composition and material use. There are, to our eyes, concepts for 4 to 5 different buildings being crammed into this new sliver. Assuming that this trade of FAR bulk for restoration of 251 is allowable and likely to be approved, we would ask LPC and the applicant to pursue a quieter, simpler, and more elegant solution for the new structure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a call-in speaker. And so I'll be unmuting your line.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners, and staff. I am Theodore Grunwald. This application was withdrawn from the May 17th public hearing agenda and was read into the record privately while the Zoom audio was muted and the screen went dark. Last week, the Historic Districts Council noticed this item had been returned to the LPC agenda and not for a public hearing, but rather for a public meeting, which, as everyone knows, cannot be commented on by the public. At that time, HDC was assured by LPC's external communications officer that public testimony would be heard on this item. However, today's posted agenda shows no change in status. It is still shown as a public meeting item. Casual examination of today's posted agenda would lead an ordinary person to believe that a public hearing had already taken place and that public testimony would not be welcome for this dog of a tower, which architecturally is more appropriate to Miami than Manhattan. The decision to hear testimony at today's public meeting without informing the public in advance robs the general public of the opportunity to prepare objections and to reach out to the press and the community at large in advance. While perhaps legal by LPC's internal rules, it is not ethical, and in business would be called a deceptive practice. Once again, as with her grotesque McGraw-Hill lobby decision, Commission Chair has provided a so-called public hearing process, which is plainly designed to give the appearance of public engagement, when in fact the process serves only to mislead and to disenfranchise the public and the LPC's own commissioners from having any say into Chair Sarah Carroll's staff-level decision-making. With this in mind, we demand that today's hearing be extended to a continuation so that the public can adequately respond and that the applicant supply more information about the materiality and architectural details of George B. Post's 1872 building restoration component, which is notably incomplete in today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not see any other hands raised. So I will note that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends denial of a certificate of harmoniousness and a certificate of appropriateness for the building at 251 Fifth Avenue and for the construction of a new building at 253 Fifth Avenue, citing the height, bulk, scale, and complexity of design.
All right, thank you.
There's one additional hand raised.
I think that was the phone call.
Oh, sorry, it
I
was
think they
Christabel.
put their hand down.
Okay, so before I turn it back to the applicants to respond to public testimony, I do want to just address the process. This item was read into the record, which is a process the commission has been using for decades, well before my time as chair. And we identify it on the agenda as read into the record to be presented at a future date. Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, read it into the record in the Zoom meeting last Tuesday, which we all heard, and it was added to this agenda. And as always, we reopen the hearing when we read things into the record. And that is what we did today. We opened up the hearing at the beginning of this session and we took public testimony. So this is consistent with our practices that we have been using for decades. And I'm sorry if there was confusion on your part, Mr. Grunwald, but this was done in accordance with the practices of the commission for decades on reading items into the record and opening up the subsequent public meeting. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to the applicants to see if they would like to respond to the comments. We've heard some comments about the restoration and the choices made with respect to period of elements. And then also we've heard some comments about the design and details of the new building.
Hi, my name is Winston Wolf. I just wanted to respond to the comment that there was not a time where the dormers and commercial storefront existed at the same time. That's not true. The 1905 image that went viral and from our presentation, it's visible. The dormer, the mansard roof, the commercial storefronts, and the turret all were in existence at the same time.
One comment about the complexity of design. This design for the new building was really an assembly of very few parts, a pilaster, a column, a bulkhead, and one material was used, terracotta. Obviously, the 28th Street wall of the new building is a very important wall for the district in that it really is, it's not a sidewall. If it was a sidewall, I think it would be disrespectful to the historic building. I think the simplicity of the new design is just augmented by a very simple gesture, which is a kneeling to the pyramidal shapes and the upward direction of the mansard. In our eyes, this building is simple, it's homogeneous, and it's not complicated.
Okay, thank you. And I did want to just, I think that we have another potential speaker from the public. Christabel Goff, I think maybe your hand was raised, and I just want to make sure that if you wanted to speak, you have the opportunity. So if you are in the meeting and want to speak.
Yes, Christabel, I just made you a panelist if you'd like to unmute your line and speak. And if you could just state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak if you can unmute your line.
Yes, I have.
Great.
She just muted herself again.
Are you able to unmute your line?
Again, yeah,
Great.
okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I'm Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. This proposal is problematic in a number of ways. After several appearances on the calendar, it is now scheduled as a public meeting item without ever having had a public hearing, which could be confusing for the public due to a lack of clarity about opportunities for the submission of public testimony. In addition, although voluminous, but perhaps insufficiently detailed materials about the restoration and the new building were made available online, we found no information about the basis for the related 74-711 application, which appears as item 2 and incorrectly identifies the building proposed to be demolished as 251 Fifth Avenue rather than 253. The surviving fragment of the building by George B. Post at 251 is close to our hearts, as years ago we found the misplaced and forgotten file in the municipal archive that identified the architect and submitted it to Mary Beth Betts for her preparation of the district designation report. 251 is a much altered building and presents challenges to the restorer, challenges only increased by the aberrant design of the adjoining tower, whose unusual cantilever projects in the form of a curvaceous bulge, positively nudging its more conventionally designed neighbor and usurping the space formerly occupied by Post's asymmetrical adjunct to the original turret, which has disappeared. This new feature is alien to the more conventional geometry of the historic district, while also failing to justify itself to the eye as an artistic formal innovation. An attempt to reconstruct the turret, while attractive in the abstract, currently fails in that it creates a condition that is not the original design, but also does not recreate any documented previously existing condition. When when dealing with an architect as noted as George B. Post, this is really not acceptable. And in earlier days of historic preservation theory, would have been decried as deceptive restoration. Certainly, it does not meet the standard for 74-711. Thank you for helping me to deal with my technical problems.
No problem. Thank you. All right. So I believe that's all of our testimony.
Okay, great. So turning back to the applicants, is there anything in the testimony we just heard that you would like to address before we move to our discussion?
Yes, we just like to point out that we're following all of the standards of replication for the missing items of the George B. Post building. We did extensive historic research. We looked into those same archives. We had a historian reviewing. Additionally, we contacted Black Star and Frost, the original developers of the site, and we're able to get some of their historic documentation that, as far as we can tell, is absent from any New York City historic archive. We're really working hard to do the correct recreation and restoration.
Okay, great. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? I am sending it.
Can I just make one point about
Yes,
the
please do.
cantilever?
Please do.
The cantilever yields to the post building. It really, as architects and form developers, we do not believe that a projection off a building 90 degrees is an appropriate solution for this cantilever. We sensitively developed this cantilever to move with the gesture of the post building. So in our eyes, the appropriateness of this cantilever, the creativity of this cantilever is in keeping with the creativity of the post building in its day when it was built. This is a site that wants creativity, imagination, forward thinking, and I can't think of any other way to present this building in light of the challenges that we had to overcome to even consider a building that wasn't a plain box.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, so if there are no questions, we'll move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? Oops, can you just say that again?
Second, sorry.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so there are two applications before us. One is for the demolition of the building at 253 and the construction of a new building that we will consider under appropriateness. And the second application is for a request for a Landmarks Preservation Commission report in relation to an application at City Planning for waiver pursuant to section 74-711 of the zoning resolution, which for our purposes has two requirements. One, that there is a preservation purpose to the project, and two, that there's a harmonious relationship. And John, correct me if I've misspoken on that, but I believe both are required as part of 74-711. And great. So the applicants have picked a period in time to work on their restoration plan and have presented that to us, which includes changes at all levels, including returning the pyramidal top to the building. And the new building is a street wall building with a cantilever on the side and a fenestrated side facade. And just will remind the commission that we have seen cantilevers in the past, most commonly adjacent to individual landmarks. And we have approved buildings that cantilever over those individual landmarks, largely with the finding that by virtue of the depth of the projection, the height of it, where it starts, and the distance from which you see it, that it is not perceptible from the majority of views. We have also twice approved a cantilever in the Ladies Mile Historic District, along with a 74-711 application. And that was on 23rd Street. I think it's 39 West 23rd Street. And it included restoration of a little smaller building at 41 West 23rd Street. And Ladies Mile is a similar district in some ways in that it represents various periods of development, including early smaller residential buildings, which then had a commercial layer. And in this case, there's an office layer that results in sort of larger footprinted buildings. And the first 74-711 we did on West 23rd Street was a new building designed by Carlos Zapata that was very sculptural in form, and the commission found that because of the sculptural massing, the cantilever would not be that perceptible. That project was never built, and a new application came to us presented by Rick Cook. And that in that application, the architect and applicant team sort of embraced the variety and the juxtaposition between front and side facades that occurs because of the juxtaposition in heights of the various buildings that represent different periods in that district. And they did an analysis of how one perceives the front and side facades. And so they designed their cantilever in a way that had a sort of play with the front facade and spoke to that sort of historic characteristic of the streetscape. And so that was a cantilever that was more perceptible, but again, related to that language of juxtaposition between front and side facades that's evident in that particular historic district. So that sort of sums up, I think, our past history with similar applications. Of course, every site is different. And so we will evaluate this particular application, both under the new building under appropriateness and the request for the special permit under section 74-711. So with that, let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure, thank you. Wow, a lot to talk about, a lot to consider. Very thorough presentation. Thank you very much. First things first, I think that the application to remove the building at 253 and replace it with a larger building is appropriate. I think that the restoration of the 251 building is very laudable. But I do think that it's very important that they work carefully with staff so that it becomes as accurate a restoration as possible and not a kind of a cartoon or a pastiche, that it hews to accepted preservation principles in this matter. And that goes to the choices of materials, details throughout. I think, however, that the skylight detail that's proposed at the ridge of the mansard is actually very clever and has limited visibility, and therefore would not, in my opinion, make it inappropriate as a candidate for the heightened level of attention that we give to 74-711 projects. I generally, and in terms of the 74-711 more generally, I think that the application of the 74-711 here is less egregious for me than it is in many other locations. I've spoken in the past about how I feel that the requirement for the relationship between the historic building and the proposed building is, I think we sometimes don't give that enough consideration as a requirement. and I know that opinions differ on that. But in my view, I think this proposal is a lot more expressive of the simple language of the resolution as I read it, in that it both seeks to vary the zoning to accord with the expression of buildings in the district, in the surroundings, which in many cases were built pre-zoning. And it also engages in a relationship with the existing building. So in terms of the design of the building itself, the new building, I think the choice of the material and the relatively monochromatic color is wise and appropriate. I do agree, however, with the comments that we heard about the busyness of it. And when I was thinking about that, listening to the testimony and looking at it myself, I think that it's true that really this is not busy in the way that the Post building was busy, with many different elements and flourishes and things like that. But it's busyness, which might not be the best word for the issue at hand, is in its depth and rhythm. And I think, as the Victorian Society, or no, it was the Historic Districts Council said, there is a lot going on here, right? The bowing of the cantilever is done to defer to the building, soften the relationship and create relationships. And that's a laudable goal. But I think that when you layer that on top of a very assertive three-dimensional grid that has a lot of depth and detail in and of itself, it blurs that reading, and it also tends to draw one's eye to the multiple modifications that are being done to the volumes and how the volumes interplay with the details. I think that the volumes per se, if one kind of looks at this as a massing as opposed to an articulated building design, are generally, I think, appropriate. And I'm not a fan of cantilevers either, and I think most of the cantilevers that we have approved have been less successful than I would have hoped. I think the one on 23rd Street actually is coming out fairly well, and I think that it's very different than this. This case here, the building, the 253 is so narrow, and that you're really seeing this building as the 251 building as a facade. And that kind of gives it something of a problem, I think. Part of the depth that one perceives on 253 is it kind of heightens the fact that this wall, which in other cases would have been a party wall, right? It accentuates the fact that it's really a front wall. It's a facade. It's a decorated facade. And that only occurs because of the joining of the two lots and the developing of them as a single building. Whereas most buildings in this district have very strong, very assertive, very austere party walls with limited penetrations. Now, obviously, that's not what's intended here, but I think that part of the problem with this side wall is that it's too front wall-ish in its depth, in its development, in the patterning of not only is it bowing in section, and not only is there lots of depth to the way that the details are developed, there's like an extension of the slab, and then a spandrel, and then a sill, and then the vertical pilasters vary. They kind of vary as you go up the building. I think that this project would enhance its relationship with the landmark and with the district much more successfully if they calmed it down, flattened it out, simplified it. I think when we, as a commission, ask for this level of richness and detail and dimension it almost always relates to a front facade condition. And because this is really not morphologically a front facade, even though it, practically for sales purposes it is, I think that it needs to kind of have more of that translation into the language of the district in terms of the simplicity, planarity of the side planes versus the ones that face the street.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Devonshire?
How does one add to anything that Michael Goldblum has said at this point? He's always remarkable. I agree with the 253 demolition. I think it's appropriate. I also agree that while the restoration might not be a textbook restoration, discussions with staff and adherence to standards will assist and go a long way in an appropriate restoration of the historic building. With regard to 74-711, I do not consider the relationship between the two to be harmonious, mostly because of things that testimony has pointed out and that Michael pointed out as well. I mean, I'm generally not a great fan of cantilevers. I actually barely see this as a cantilever, but rather a corbel, which awkwardly visually appears to be a bowing of the new building that is about to then collapse on the historic building. And the dissonance, that anti-harmony is really off-putting to me. That's the beginning, and then the heavy articulation of that facade is something that I absolutely cannot agree with. And so I think there are 2 points. In this particular image, for example, I look at the building behind, two buildings behind, and that flat facade, as mundane as it may seem, would actually be more appropriate as far as I'm concerned against the building on the corner. No competition, no fireworks, no nothing. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, to echo the two Michaels, I'm in agreement with the testimony. I think the demolition of 253 is appropriate, and I do wholeheartedly agree that the applicant should work closely with staff in the restoration details. And I think the 74-711 has been articulated eloquently by Commissioner Goldblum. I think that the applicant should refine it. I think it really is drawing attention to itself rather than harmoniously. It's really the southern facade is needs further work.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Thank you. I'll try not to repeat except where necessary. Certainly the demolition is acceptable. Just a few additional thoughts. It seems to me as if the restoration of 251 is off to a fine start, but working closely with staff will be crucial, as it always is, but particularly crucial here perhaps to get it right. I just want to add one thought that it's often that a chosen period of a building's evolution or the layering of it over time is chosen. And I'm just thinking back to our firm's work at Ellis Island years and years and years ago. It was a controversial decision, but nonetheless a decision that James Marston Fitch pretty well eloquently and philosophically stated that we should choose a period, and it was chosen, I think it was 1910 or 1912, a period when the greatest number of immigrants were coming through that place, and that was chosen as a period. So I think just to put the point on this, that the building evolved over time, and to choose a time of particular importance. And I think this, to my mind and my eye, this is a relevant time to have chosen of the evolution. Now, that stated, I have to wonder why, in this case, the as of right zoning was found to be so abhorrent here, in that it would have showcased from the north looking south much more persuasively the rather distinctive element, the turret or the pyramidal roof of this building. It seems to me like, I mean, he made the right points about why that zoning is often not appropriate here, but in this case, it might have been. Nonetheless, that's not where we are, and I'm not going to suggest that you go back and start all over. But it did strike me that massing that was shown on the zoning envelope study could well have been an appropriate massing here. Now, but also I want to just compliment the presentation, the architects in there. Really a tour de force presentation, not only the beautiful graphics and I think very worked out graphics, but also the depth of analysis and history that they gave to us on this building. I just want to be sure that was not lost, at least in my thoughts. However, now, the bulge, I think the bulge is inappropriate. Is it really noticeable as a cantilever? It's been said by Michael Devonshire, it's not really, and I accept that, but it is a bulge and it's strange. I didn't think of it as an imminent collapse, or visually at least, but it made me chuckle. So I think the bulge is inappropriate. In fact, I think any cantilever is inappropriate. However, I also think that a minimalist facade, let's say the facade on the Palace Hotel above the art houses, which I think is very unsuccessful and a wrong approach, 35 years ago. I think because this is so closely associated with the street itself, separated only by the thinness of the historic building, that this is an appropriate place to articulate an interesting facade. And without getting into playing designer, which I try always not to do, I do think it is, as has been said many times already, too complicated. And maybe there's some geometries of those chimneys or something in the historic building that might articulate in some other way. By the way, if the loss of the bulge adds up to square feet that the owner and architect still have to play with, I would find nothing problematic about adding another floor to this building. So I think that's enough to be said by me, and let's let the baton go around the table and let others speak.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
Thank you. I also want to thank the applicant for their very thorough and thoughtful presentation. And I'm going to just quickly duplicate or repeat some of what's been said. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners who've already spoken for making it easy in a way, because I agree with a lot of what's been said by both of the Michaels and also by Fred. So of course I approve the application to remove the building and applaud the restoration work, affirming the need to work closely with staff. I don't have a problem with the idea of a cantilever here in general. And this bowing that exists, I think, is a little problematic in that two things, it calls a lot of attention to what's going on here. But also I think at the rooftop of the building, of the building that's being restored, it crowds it too much. And when I look at it, I feel claustrophobic a little bit. So I would like to recommend that, I'm guessing that the reason for the cantilever is the need for more width on this building, because this is going to be residential space. I could be wrong. I don't have a problem with adding a floor to this building if that solves a square footage need problem, but I'm guessing the width is important. And maybe actually we need a little bit of both, because I'm going to suggest that the cantilever actually start at a higher level. And if the facade of the building is simplified in terms of its articulation, which I completely agree with, then I think it won't be, it won't compete in any way with the more historic building. I would also like to recommend that the color be changed on the new building, because I think the lighter color makes it stand out more against the corner building, and in a way we want it to recede. So I would, in addition to simplifying, and I think it should be something muted, like maybe a little grayish or something that the applicant could work on, so that what's really front and center is the historic building, and the building itself, even though it's larger, is just sort of almost more of a backdrop that doesn't appear. Whereas I think in this light color, it kind of pops. And so I'm not looking at, and I also think if this idea of like starting the cantilever higher is, makes any sense, it also would recede.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I'll reiterate a couple of points here. The demolition is okay. The work on 251 is acceptable. I would put extreme emphasis on the point Michael Goldblum made about working with our staff to make sure that it meets all of our standards. They are the best, and I think that they'll know what to ask for. In terms of the new building, height and bulk are fine, and I agree with Commissioner Bland that if they wanted more space, I don't even have a problem with the building being slightly taller. However, I also agree that it is not harmonious. I think I'm in agreement with both Michaels about the heavy articulation on the side of the building, and I'm not a. I think the facade of the building overhanging the smaller building is really not appropriate, but I am okay with the material and the color of the new building. I think that's fine. I actually think the contrast is the only thing that I think I actually, in terms of harmonious, I think that part works. So that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I see Commissioner Jefferson has just joined us, but I think you didn't hear the presentation, so you may not be comfortable commenting at this point.
Right, yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so then we'll move to Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. I agree with a lot of the comments about the appropriateness of the demolition of the 253 site, of the potential the restoration of the historic building as being something that can be done well in consultation at a detailed level with the staff, and so I have confidence that that the staff will be able to require and monitor the kind of that the restoration is of a high quality. I think I disagree with almost everyone about this bulge. I find it to be an actually not inappropriate. I don't know that it's perfectly done. I have a problem with the kind of the movement on various sides of, on the multiple sides of the building, on the short side, and then the jog on the top, and the jog in the, the kind of this other bias cut against it on the long face. But as an idea, design idea, which typically, it's not particularly interesting for me to comment on design of new construction in this context, but I don't find it to be inappropriate or offensive. I think and I don't think there's something about it as well that brings kind of points to the historic building in a strange way. It does not feel like it would topple it or overwhelm it or detract from it in my mind. So I see that I'm absolutely in the minority and likely it'll be made to go away, but I'm not against it. And I kind of agree. I think I may agree with Jeannie Lutfi on the color, that there is something a little bit, at least in the rendering, something dated in the cream color or in the two color. And I would go for one or the other, like either a very sort of starkly, monolithically whitish cream building, or something that is more like the enframelments and are described, that are, it's a little bit of a darker, dark clay color is what it looks like to me. But that's all for my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree largely with Commissioner Goldblum's comments, and also with Commissioner Devonshire's and others commissioners. But basically, I agree that the demolition of the building in this context is appropriate, given it's a no-style building and lack of and its changes over time. But I do think that on the restoration, that the staff should work very closely with the applicant. I think that the bulk of the taller building is appropriate in this context, in this district, but I also find that the new building seems rather busy, whether it's fenestration, variety, rhythm, structure. There are a lot of aspects that could be addressed. And that's why I said with Commissioner Devonshire, I sort of looked at the building, the not very interesting building from the side, and said, yeah, that approach would be better. But that's going further than I think the applicant really needs to go. I think, though, that currently, when you look at the building straight on over Fifth Avenue and view 60, and view here, this is 59, I think, you see the cantilever, I think, is a distraction from my point of view. And the side view, there's just so much going on that it is distracting from the historic building. In another context, the design would be interesting and welcome, I think. But I think here, this relationship to the historic building is my chief concern, as it is that of other commissioners. So it needs to be toned down in some fashion. So, and I think the materials, I think, are appropriate. So I can approve the demolition, the replacement, everything except the some of the busyness of the current building in the context next to the historic building. And actually, there's another historic building on the other side, but I'm focusing on the one that will be restored under the 74-711.
Okay, great. All right, so I too want to thank the applicants for a thoughtful and detailed and complete presentation. And of course, thank the public for their thoughtful testimony and suggestions and ideas. And commissioners, thank you all for your very thoughtful comments. And I think that where we are is we'll take no action today. And I think that there is a general consensus of support for the demolition of the existing building at 253 Fifth Avenue, and a consensus of support for the approach for the restoration work at 251 Fifth working closely with staff to ensure that the details and materials and execution is up to preservation standards and our standards. And then with respect to the new building, I think what I've heard is that the commission has found that the new building is appropriate in terms of its height and materiality. However, finding that there's this sort of balance between a side facade that will be very visible and sort of frontal on the street because of the skinniness of the building, but also needing to be simplified to be more like side facades in the historic district. And I think there have been a lot of good suggestions about how one could do that. I think for some commissioners, the cantilever is, I think twice I heard that there's no comfort with any cantilever. I think with others, it depends on the level of design and the way that you approach simplifying the facade and in terms of the material choices, details, and layering, and how that works with any bit of extension that you want to propose that cantilevers in a way that is discreet and harmonious still with the historic building and with the buildings in the historic district. So I think it's, a real study of this side facade, both in terms of its design and how that design is articulated with any cantilever. So we will take no action, and we will have you back after you have thought about this and when you have a revised proposal. So thank you all. We'll move to the next public meeting item.
Okay, we'll now do public meeting item number 3, LPC 22-07348, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1389, Lot 45, 38 East 75th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1881 to 82 and altered by John Ingle in 1926. The application is to replace and redesign the front facade and construct rooftop and rear yard additions. This was last presented at the public hearing of May 3rd, 2022. No action was taken at that time, and the applicants will begin the presentation after we open the proceedings.
Okay, thank you. And we'll just do that right now. So that's a seamless transition. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the applicants may present now.
Terrific. Thank you, commissioners. Good morning. Cass Mackelberg, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. Excuse me, and I'm joined by Gary Brewer of Robert A. M. Stern Architects. Let me advance the slides. Just as a reminder, we were here earlier in the month at a public hearing and had an extensive conversation, and I want to just sort of remind the commissioners of the project site. 38 East 75th Street is located on the south side of 75th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. The building has a no style designation in the 1981 Upper East Side Historic District designation. And just to point out its context in this mid-block site is at the west end of a row of houses, those 3 other houses that are part of that row, 2 of which you can see here on the left. They maintain their cornices, and when the district was designated in the 1980s, those 3 buildings were given style designations largely because of their the presence of their cornice. 38 East 75th Street did not get a style designation. Just continuing on, Gary's going to share the specifics of the changes that we've made, but I'd like to just start the conversation by noting that we heard your comments. There were comments about sort of a perceived heaviness and a lack of delicacy, and I think as is so often the case, absorbing your comments and responding to them has resulted in what we think is a better design. What we shared with you at the public hearing, you can see here on the left. On the right is our revision. It is more restrained, more subtle detailing. It's a flatter design, but still has many of the neoclassical and sort of restrained details that one sees in the district from buildings dating to the first quarter of the 20th century. Looking at some of those buildings, we've included a few different examples. I think, without going through these in great detail, I think the point here is that both historically and under commission review, the district is filled with a range of facade articulations and detailing. But I think, there are buildings like these two, 80 64th Street and 10 East 67th Street here, noted in the designation report, this one with an Adamesque style designation, and this with a neoclassical, as compared to the sort of more robust heavy Beaux-Arts detailing that you see elsewhere in the district. These are really sort of what we are modeling our design on, but remembering that the firm of Robert A.M. Stern Architects has been doing this for many years. They are masters at what they do. This is not a design that is a kit of parts, but is really inspired by the buildings of the district, but it's very much its own design. So, a range of details and expressions across the facade, across the district, these sort of more robust Beaux-Arts details, and then some of the more restrained elements that one sees in the neoclassical detailing on other streets in the district. I thought it was also just worth mentioning that as sort of a reminder that since 1981, when the district was designated, through those 4 decades, the commission has approved a range of different new buildings, particularly limestone fronted buildings, almost exclusively in a traditional design idiom. But these 4 examples here is from the 1980s, 1990s, and 2 examples from the aughts sort of show the range of stylistic expressions that the commission has seen as appropriate, these sort of more postmodern expressions. This building here on the left actually replaced a building that had a style designation. The others on this slide replaced buildings that had no style designations. And then a range of articulations and facade detailing, entries at grade, below grade, above grade. And then this slide, similarly, buildings that replaced limestone fronted buildings that replaced no style buildings, as well as those that had style designations. And you see again the sort of variety of treatment. This building here on the far left, that's limestone fronted, but almost has an Italianate expression. And then these others that sort of range from the more traditional to the sort of more contemporary expression. So a wide range of both historical examples and commission approved examples. And we see our design really as its own entity, but sort of taking its inspiration from those historic examples. And with that, I'll have Gary take you through the design revision.
Thanks, Cass, and thanks to the members of the commission. We've spent some time looking at the design. We heard some general support about a new limestone traditional facade, but we also heard some comments, good comments we thought, about maybe ways to edit and simplify it. So what's on the screen right now is the proposed new design. Next, please. And here you can see on the left-hand side what we presented at the earlier meeting, and then what we're proposing on the right. The proposed design has changed in 2 basic ways. We've thought about how a pedestrian sees the building from the sidewalk, with most of the emphasis being on the first 3 floors. And then the upper 3 floors, perhaps with the exception of the building eave, are less visible. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've made changes to the upper floors in the most way. We've eliminated the belt course, and we've eliminated the pilasters with a heavy coining on the right and left side. And we've treated these 2 floors with punched windows, more reminiscent of townhouses that you see within the district. And then we have also removed at the upper level below the eave, the recessed panels, and then the panels above the windows below. We've also made changes to the arch as well to simplify. Next, please. So here you can see the changes proposed at the earlier meeting on the left and the current design on the right. At the bay, we've kept the basic bay, but we've simplified elements. At the opening above the front door, we've simplified the surround with eliminating the split scroll at the over door. And then we have added casings around the 2nd and the 3rd floor openings as opposed to the punched openings. Next, please. And here are examples of historic buildings that have somewhat similar treatments of elements. At the base of the building, we'd like to propose a rusticated limestone with a granite water table. At the over door above the front door, you can see a simple arched casing with cased openings and crossettes. The arch has been simplified. We have removed the arch casing and replaced it with voussoirs similar to the Vincent Astor townhouse by Mott Schmidt. We simplified the cornice detail. And so we are proposing a three-part cornice with a cyma, corona, modillions, and dentils. And then the biggest change is to change the balustrade both above the cornice and at the bay to a woven style balustrade similar to what you see at the Colony Club, rather than the heavier turned balusters that we proposed in the earlier design. Next, please. And just for a little more detail, you can see the bottom three floors proposed on the left with the changes on the right and the subtle modifications to edit and simplify it. Next, please. And then again, the top three floors, the left on the left, the earlier proposed design, and on the right with the simplification of removing the belt course, changing the detailing of the arch, and removing the panels, and then the changes that were made to the balustrade, as well as the dormers, which now have casings and arched over windows. Next, please. Here are the proposed materials: limestone, granite at the base, painted front door, antique copper at the mansard, and then bronze for light fixtures, and black for the metal rail at the parlor level. Next, please. And here you can see on the left the proposed perspective and the simplification of the right. And is this the last slide?
No.
Can you go next, please? And here you can see it in the overall street elevation. And as I started, I think that the comments that we heard from the board and the changes we've made have helped to improve the design. I'm sort of reminded of a quote by Mark Twain, where he wrote and said, "I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short letter." So we've had a little bit of time to go back to the drawing board and simplify it. And in many cases, when one edits a design, it ends up being improved. So thanks for everyone's comments. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts about the design revisions.
Okay, thank you very much. First, commissioners, do we have any questions before we go into a discussion? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So I will just also note for the record that we received a letter from the Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts not supporting this redesign, the proposed redesign that we're looking at today. And as always, that letter was circulated to commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. All right, so if there are no questions, we will go ahead and begin our discussion. And commissioners, I'm just right now sending you requests to unmute yourself. So if you can look at that, that would be great. Okay, so, you know, we had a lot of discussion last time about the no style termination and how it is applied in this particular historic district. And of course, in many historic districts, we identify no style buildings as non-contributing buildings. But in this particular historic district, the no style addition was, or no style term was sort of codified by the Board of Estimate, who had to affirm designations in the past. And the Board of Estimate decision imposed on our designation a process that would allow for no style buildings to be approved, the demolition of no style buildings to be approved under a certificate of no effect, the commission should approve a new design. So again, before us today, we are looking at the new facades of this building. We looked at the front and the rear last time. Everybody was comfortable with the design proposal for the rear facade. So we are not looking at the demolition, really, we are looking at the design of the new facades. And so we'll begin our discussion on that. And again, as I noted last time, and as the applicant noted today, the commission has many times approved new limestone facades on buildings that have been identified as no style buildings. And in some cases, buildings that had a style, as the applicant showed us today. And we've approved new limestone facades with classical details and have done that in a variety of ways, some more robust and some more austere, and varying levels of quality as well, finding that that approach and that interpretation of that style is an interpretation of the early 20th century layer that existed in this particular historic district when the 19th century brownstone row houses were altered and sometimes their facades entirely replaced. And so, we've seen more examples today of some of the historic early 20th century Beaux-Arts and neoclassical facades. We've also seen some examples of ones the commission has approved. And so I think that finding that approach to be appropriate here would be consistent with the historic layering of the district and the character and the past, our past regulatory history here. And I also think that, that this new building can be its own thing. It doesn't have to necessarily replicate one or other type of neoclassical or Beaux-Arts facade. It's an interpretation. And I think it can have its own plane, different floor heights and materials and style, as was typically done in the facade replacements in this historic district, again, both historically and through commission approvals. And I think this applicant is, as Cass said, a master of interpreting appropriate styles in a particular context. And so I think that having this sort of stand on its own as an interpretation is appropriate in this historic district with the variety of facade alterations that have taken place over the last century, really. And I also think, that we're looking at typical things that we ask for, which are high quality materials, thoughtful design and contextual scale, and a thoughtful level of articulation and detail. So, and I think the applicants have really responded to many of our comments, not all, but many of our comments were about simplifying and lightening up, specifically lightening up the details. And so I think going to the smooth ashlar and eliminating some of the heavier surrounds and the projecting upper floors have been changes that have really improved the building's relationship to the district. Commissioner Bland, I think last time you were sort of I think you were unclear about the Board of Estimate codification of the term no style in this particular historic district, but I think you were comfortable with the general approach for the new facade. That's, I can ask you to start.
Maybe, sort of. I could have approved all of this confectionery if it were applied to the remaining shell, if we want to call it that, of the front facade, which has the same windows, obviously, as the three townhouses to the left or east of it. I could have gone along with this. That's not a problem. I just still have a problem with eliminating that building. Style, no style, contributing, non-contributing, Board of Estimate, whatever it was, sorry. But I just can't go along with with this. Had all of this been applied almost as it is now to that, I could have approved it, but I just can't see that going. So I can't go on with it. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so it's because the demolition, which could be approved at staff level, eliminates a building that has proportional relationship to the row.
Right.
All right, so
Maybe my whole thinking here is even flawed. I just, my heart says no.
Okay.
I have to go along with it. You know, this is atypical for me, but I'm sorry.
okay. All right. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson, I think you were comfortable with it last time. Let's hear your thoughts about where you are with it now.
First of all, I want to defend Commissioner Bland because typically he's not heartless. He does have a lot of heart, and he shouldn't play that down. But I completely understand Commissioner Bland's concern, and but I do, even if had never been familiar with this whole Board of Estimate issue. I do try to follow what the constraints are, the rule constraints are on us. So setting all of that aside, which I think I must, I am okay with with what's been done here, which is to say the final product is acceptable. It is I think they hit the nail on the head in terms of the small improvements and tweaks that needed to be done to calm it down a bit. And so that I think is fine. I do wish I was in a different position here and I could say, I don't want this to be done at all, but we are where we are.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, I think you were also comfortable with it as sort of a representation of the transitional changes in the Upper East Side Historic District. So what are your thoughts today after seeing the revised design?
I think that the applicant has been responsive and I can approve it as presented.
All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, I think you, I think you said that you could accept it, but you were concerned about the hierarchy of the facade and some of the details and also lightening it up. And so I wonder how the changes are making you feel now.
Well, I think it's appropriate. And it's very interesting to me because I realize now that there was a certain elegance to the first scheme, and because of the proportions, they have changed on the second, and the building is divided in two parts. There's the first two levels, and then the upper level, which is simplified. But in both cases, they're very well done facades, so I can approve it.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Chen, I think you specifically said that the rear was appropriate and that on the front you wanted to hear what other commissioners thought. And so I wonder where you are today.
Yeah, I agree with the majority of the comment that the applicant has listened to the commissioner's suggestions and has made improvements. I'm going to go along with Commissioner Gustafson's suggestion as well as Commissioner Jefferson's comment. Notwithstanding the Board of Estimates background, I think that it is an appropriate design.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Shamir Barron, I think you also had a problem with demolition, notwithstanding the Board of Estimate rule within this historic district. And that rule might be the wrong word, so John, correct me if I use the wrong terminology. But I think you were, despite the fact that the staff can issue a CNE, a certificate of no effect for demolition, I think you were uncomfortable with that. And then also had some concerns about the detailing, particularly at the windows, which I think some of which has been addressed in this. And so how are you feeling now?
I've I shared Fred Bland's concerns, and those have not really been allayed or made better. And yet I agree with Commissioner Gustafson. It seems that this part of it is not at all within our control, and the demolition could, in a sense, and would occur even without our acknowledgement or approval. And so I do think, though, that the changes that they've made to the detailing are very successful. Tightening up, kind of cleaning the kind of the extra fur on it and tightening it, and the definition around the windows is much, much stronger and better. So I think I can approve it as presented.
Okay, thanks. All right, and Commissioner Goldblum, I think you were understanding the regulatory requirements of this particular district as they relate to the no style term. I think you were okay with the demolition because that isn't really before us, but you also had concerns about the detailing of the facades and wanting it to be a little bit lighter and more like some of the historic examples, and also the plane and proportional relationships to the other buildings that were part of this former row.
Right. Could you go to the previous slide? It's page 18. Perfect. This slide is the basis of my continued opposition to the project. I think that as a new building in a row where the building that was legally demolished was a part of a row, I would have argued in that case, as I am arguing here, for the perpetuation of the rhythm of windows and the cornice height along the four facades. And I would have also argued for the perpetuation of the window rhythm at the top two floors. And I remain convinced that that is an appropriate solution here. I think that my concerns about the design of the entrance have not been addressed either. I think that Cass has shown us, I think it was, 12 or so buildings, only one of which had a lowered entrance. The overwhelming majority of buildings that are new designs for new facades in the limestone style, classical styles that he's reviewed, have gone out of their way to regularize the entrance and make the entrance have a more formal relationship with the street. The entrances that are down are clearly modified brownstones where the budgets were lower, most likely. And I think it's kind of against the type for me, in my understanding of that district, to have such an elaborately designed new building with a compromised entrance of that nature. That said, however, I think that the building detailing is greatly improved, as others have noted. Carrera and Hastings would be happier with it. It's got a lighter feel, and it also just feels more residential and a little less institutional, and therefore, again, more appropriate. Also on the block, it blends better to the federal, style building next door to it, I think, more successfully. But I still remain firmly opposed to the design because of the reasons I described already.
Okay, great, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I do think that would also be an appropriate solution to relate to the row, because I think historically facades were either just sort of altered and their proportions kept, or they were completely changed and floor slabs changed. But I guess that's also why I think having its own set of proportions, even in this context, is appropriate, because it is consistent with the variety of ways these buildings were altered historically, and through commission approvals where we've allowed changes in floor heights. And we've even, in buildings that sort of had their 19th century floor slabs, we've allowed new limestone facades where the entrance is partially below grade. So I think, as much as I would also like to see it just sort of proportionally above grade, I think it's not inconsistent with our some of our prior approvals where we've sort of worked with existing floor slabs. So, but thank you for your thoughtful comments. All right, Commissioner Lutfi, you were not here last time, so you've heard the presentation and the comments around the table. So are you prepared to comment? Do you have thoughts on this?
I am. I mean, I see I'm only going to be dealing with this one aspect of the project, but I'm happy to comment. I first want to go back to Fred's, which many people have, Fred's thoughts and feelings about this. And I am very sympathetic with that position, because if you think about other traditional, I'm going to say historic neighborhoods, especially brownstone neighborhoods in brownstone Brooklyn, for example, in Brooklyn Heights, the facade that was there and the building that was there, or
Oh, yes, sorry about that. I'll turn it off so I can hear you, but
those buildings wouldn't come down because the context is so strong. There's no way those buildings would come down. But so I'm very sympathetic and I understand it, but the context of this neighborhood has changed, I would say, pretty substantially. And whether or not that's for the good is, another discussion. But within that context, I think what the applicant is trying to do here, basically, working, designing something that is, more classically inspired I think it's legitimate. And my sense in looking at what was proposed and what is here now, the changes, which are refinements, are very positive, and they've really cleaned up and simplified the facade. And within this context, and with the changes, I could approve this.
Yeah, and I do, this district is very different from the Brooklyn Heights Historic District or some of our other historic districts, in that there was this historic layer of change, a distinct period in the 19 teens and 20s and 30s when these facades were redone, and many of them altered with classically inspired details. And then it's also different in that there's the no style designation, which allows for staff level approval for demolition. And it's different in that the commission has for decades approved various approaches to a neoclassical limestone Beaux-Arts facade. So I think the layering is quite unique here. Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire, you also were not present last time, but have heard the presentation and discussion today. So if you have some thoughts, that would be great.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, with regard to the Board of Estimate issue, I'm in heartless Fred Bland's camp with that, but we're given what we're given here, and I agree with Jean. The context that we have been given, and I agree that the changes that have been made are acceptable and an improvement. And it is certainly an improvement from the postmodern thing that Cass showed us from the 1980s. God help us all.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I know we have mixed feelings here, but I think we have a majority and quorum for a vote to approve this. So let me go ahead and I'll make the motion and we'll do the vote and see where we are. Okay, so.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I had this open and it's disappeared. Okay, here we go. In the matter of docket number 22-02, oops. Twenty-two 07348, 38 East 75th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, a row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1881 to 82 and altered by John Engel in 1926. This is an application to replace and redesign the facades and construct rooftop and rear yard additions. And I note that the building is not one of the buildings for which the Upper East Side Historic District was designated, and that it is identified as having no style in the Upper East Side Historic District designation report. I recommend approval, finding that the character defining features of the house's original Italianate style were lost prior to the designation of the historic district, and the early 20th century alterations are not unique or representative of exceptional details or craftsmanship. Therefore, the substantial demolition of this building will not eliminate a significant feature of the streetscape or the historic district, that the proposed design is in keeping with the long tradition within the Upper East Side Historic District of altering or replacing earlier facades with new classically inspired facades, that the introduction of a new building facade that does not take its cues from the facade or building it replaces in terms of wall plane, floor heights, and other features, irrespective of belonging to a row, was typical of early 20th century alterations in this historic district, that the height of the building and number of floors will maintain typical proportions for townhouses within this historic district and will be in keeping with the range of building heights within the streetscape, that the overall composition of the front facade in terms of materials, finishes, symmetry, fenestration, level of articulation, and use of classical elements will evoke historic Beaux-Arts style row houses in this historic district, that the hierarchical organization and proportional relationship of facade elements will be consistent with historic classically inspired buildings and supportive of a cohesive design, that the front facade will feature elements typical of buildings throughout the streetscape and historic district, including multi-light casement windows, paired primary entrance doors, decorative metalwork, denticulated cornices and band courses, balustrades, sloped mansard roof, dormer windows, and masonry chimney, all with proportions and profiles which help these elements to maintain a unified composition and relate well to neighboring properties throughout the streetscape. That the placement and height of the areaway fencing will align with fencing and neighboring properties, supporting a unified streetscape composition. That the bluestone paving and planted areas at the areaway will be in keeping with the materials and configuration found at other areaways on the block. That the existing rear facade has been modified over time with an addition and stucco coating, and therefore the construction of a new 4-story rear yard addition, which does not project further into the rear yard than the existing rear yard addition, will not disrupt a fully intact historic rear facade or substantially increase the existing massing. That the rear addition will not project into the rear yard beyond the existing extensions within the block and therefore will not diminish the central green space. That the design and materiality of the rear addition featuring multi-light windows, profiled wood and brick cladding will be in keeping with the character of rear facades within the block. That the rooftop bulkhead, rear flue extensions, and mechanical units will not be visible from any public thoroughfares and will be set back from the front and rear facades, and that the work will enhance the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. All right, Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Nay.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
8 in favor, 2 opposed. The motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll now move to our
Thank
public
you all.
hearing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin with public hearing item number 1, LPC 21-10217. an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2367, Lot 43, 7 Fillmore Place and the Fillmore Place Historic District. This is an altered colonial revival style garage building built in 1912. The application is to replace windows, doors, and ironwork and construct a rooftop addition and other rooftop elements.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Andre, you now have control of the presentation. Please unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin. Whoops. Please don't hit escape. Okay. Andre, please click on your screen and just advance the slides using your arrow keys. Andre, you need to click on your screen.
Hi, I'm sorry now. I think I have a good connection now.
Okay, can you just click on your screen?
Yes, give me a second.
Great. Now you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Perfect. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
My name is Andre Gomez. I'm with Andre Architecture. I'm the design architect at 7 Fillmore Place. I'm working and represent the owner, Raul.
And hey, nice to meet everyone. I'm the owner, Rahul Chabria. I purchased this property about a year ago, and it's my first ever home. I'm 25 years old, and I've lived in New York City my entire life, and very excited to take this project on and restore 7 Fillmore. So we appreciate your time, and we've worked very hard with the commission to make this presentation today.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and begin. So I'll start with site context, just to reorient you with the neighborhood and the surrounding property. We are in the Fillmore Place Historic District, as shown, outlined in red. This is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and just south of Metropolitan Ave, right off Driggs Avenue on Fillmore Place. Going to show an aerial with some parcels just so you can kind of see the immediate context of the neighborhood. The majority of the historic developments are on Fillmore Place, but the historic designation extends to the west towards Driggs. A little bit more vacancy actually towards the west side of the historic district. We have a vacant parcel adjacent across the street from us, as well as some open space on the west end there on Driggs. And there's a triangular development that's underway right now on the parcel to the north of us. You can see that triangle there just above us. And I will talk a little bit about that development, which is close to topping out, I believe. And because that bulk is so visual from Fillmore Place. Actually, I don't believe that particular parcel is a historic designation, but because it's visible from Fillmore, that's why it's relevant to the presentation. So looking east towards Fillmore, our property at 7 is direct line of sight, first building on the left there. You have the beautiful row housing marching down Fillmore, of course. That's where the majority of the historic character of Fillmore Place really is. Adjacent to us is like a one-story garage type building, chain link fence, not only at the fence line, but on the roof too. And then looking towards the west, we have another one-story building adjacent to us, and then a corner property with a little less of the special character that we see on the other end of Fillmore. We have the vacant parcel next to us, and then a few townhomes, probably mixed use now towards the west end there. You see the open space I was talking about earlier. calling attention to the parcel to the north of us, which is proposed as a 7-story building, 5 plus 2 penthouse type masses. Definitely a lot of visibility from Fillmore. It's almost it's directly to the north of us. It's one parcel behind. It's 25-foot parcel or so. So a lot of visibility from of this mass as you look towards our project. Talk about the current conditions. We're lucky enough to have a 1940s tax map image. So we've been using this as our North Star, kind of going forward with our design and design decisions. You can see the beautiful brickwork of this former carriage house, the carriage doors, the stone lintel, really strong horizontal lines with the brickwork, although a relatively simple facade. Here's where we stand today. Current condition. We're fortunate enough that the majority of the structure is really intact, at least on the exterior. A lot of the brickwork, although severely damaged and vandalized, is mostly intact. And so the intent is to preserve this as much as possible, to restore this as much as possible, really focusing our historic efforts on the brickwork, the stone lintels, the stone cap, the simple arches, or I'm sorry, the simple rectangular paneling at the top of the cornice, and then bringing it up to a current living standard for my client, and making it a home. And so that'll include new windows and new doors, and a few other amenities in order to make this current and livable. So part of our facade restoration plan, I'll start with the front elevation here. As I was saying, all the original brick matched, replaced, the stone lintels matched and replaced, and then new openings. So I'll talk about first the windows, which has been a topic of discussion for our throughout our process. So we're proposing a painted metal window. I'm showing the painted metal in like a dark charcoal type color. We are proposing aluminum, doing so for durability, for long-term maintenance. We also want to do the maximum opening size, just to get the best ventilation we can for the interior. And we also are proposing a bifold door at the ground floor. And so these have somewhat vertical proportions. We chose a bifold for a couple of reasons. First of all, the function of it working is really the best with the property line and not in conflict with some utilities that we have on the interior space. But also the vertical proportions are kind of reminiscent of detailing for a carriage house door, with like vertical wood paneling. And the remainder of the windows we've just left sort of simple, and we've done so intentionally to really kind of just celebrate the brick, as not detract from the brick, just to kind of leave the brick as its own special, as really the special design element, and again to meet our goals for ventilation and for long-term maintenance and durability. And there's been a little bit of discussion about whether these are articulated or not, and we've made the decision to choose non-articulated windows, just because we felt that in the instance of a full metal opening, that we didn't want to didn't want to use a divider like that. Doesn't really feel authentic versus like a traditional double hung type thing. So that's our proposal for the windows. There is a glass swing door also at the entry down there, and these both the bifold and the swing door include a privacy frit in order to. It's just a film. It's a privacy film onto the windows, and that's just to give privacy to the ground floor there. There is an addition, a rooftop addition on the top here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But essentially, it's a painted metal, a combination of painted metal and glass. We also have a solar panel canopy up there too. The solar panels are detailed as a shade structure in front of the windows, which gives shade to the windows, a little bit of protection on the roof there from the elements. But really, it holds our solar panels, which we have about 7 of. There is a frameless clear glass guardrail, which I'll talk more about as we go on. And that's because the roof is occupied, and we have some existing conditions with the steel in the roof. And as we build a new roof on top of that, we need a guardrail. And so, because the existing parapet height is not tall enough to serve as a guardrail, and so we've done this as a frameless clear glass guardrail, low iron, no cap. The idea is really that this is as invisible as possible. On the street elevation, we have fences on either side at about 4 foot tall. We're proposing to match that height with a 4 foot square picket fence type design. Simple, no ornamentation, don't want to detract from the building, just metal picket, simple design. In a painted metal, the painted metal will match the color of the windows in like a dark charcoal. Side elevation, we have the adjacent 1-story building. There's 2 stories above of, 1 story above of existing stucco. And then the rooftop bulk addition at the top in a painted metal. Painted metal is in the charcoal family, sort of matching again what we have in the windows and some of the detailing and that secondary color to complement the brick. You see the solar canopy there. We did end up reducing that during the design review process. We shaved about a foot off the length of that just by switching to a different panel, trying to minimize that the visual view of it. And you see the clear glass guardrail there on the side as well. On the rear facade, we have a 3-story adjacent building and a 1-story adjacent building. 2 stories of stucco. That's an existing condition. Choosing to keep it as is. It's like a light gray type color, which there's a fair amount of on the block. And then concrete masonry for the bulkhead addition on the rear facade only, just because there's no visual of that, and we're on a 0 lot line condition. We do have flat skylights, just keeping those a few inches above parapet. In order so not so visible. The other side facade, very similar to the other one, 1-story adjacent building, 1 story of stucco, then the painted metal above. Good to talk about some of the construction details. That's just been a part of our design intent and part of our conversation with the agency so far. So a couple typical details of the window and also the front door. So I think what's most important here is that we've chosen to set the window back 1 brick module just to expose the side of the brick, which, as far as we can tell best from the tax map image, that was the original detailing, that the side brick was exposed. So keeping in line with that, just to show that the brick turns the corner and to give it a good sense of strength there. As I've been saying, aluminum windows, the intention is that entire window opens and will be a long-term solution for the client. At the parapet, I have the existing condition down here existing metal structural deck. That's about 30 inches below our current parapet. Steel beams there, steel deck. And so really we need to build on top of that. And so we'll insulate that above, which is better for energy performance. We'll slope it because it doesn't have a proper slope. And we'll add a proper roofing termination on it. And what that does is it pushes our guardrail up. We're still at code minimum as far as the guardrail height above the finished flooring condition. And as I've been saying, we've detailed that in clear glass, no frame, no cap. So really, as you'll see in the images, this guardrail really just kind of becomes somewhat of an invisible element. At least that's the intention. I do have a reference image on the right there. You can see the sky pass through and whatnot. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the bulkhead. Start with a plan. We have a stairway to roof. That's about 2/3 of the bulkhead there. The remaining third is for solar equipment and miscellaneous mechanical, which is a good thing because a lot of our utilities are hidden away then. Keep that out of sight. The bulkhead steps 15 foot back from the face of facade, which is fairly consistent with what the original bulkhead design was, which you can see in the tax map image. There was an original bulkhead there. And so we're really just kind of recreating this original mass and doing so in a current, up to a current condition. Street section from across Fillmore. The bulkhead is out of the line of sight when directly across. You do see a glimpse of the canopy. And as I detail the canopy here, you can see it's really mostly solid in appearance. So no exposed structure. We have a solid panel underneath it, and then above it is the solar panel. But the solar panels are basically, one next to another. So that even if you could see up there, which you can't from the groundscape, of course, basically there's no steel exposed. And then we've wrapped the edge of this detail with a little metal closure plate. So it just kind of becomes like a solid, real sleek thing. But yeah, the bulkhead's out of view, and then all of the equipment on the roof. It's just a couple of miscellaneous amenities for the owner. Those are also out of view, as you can see from this section here. So we'll go to the 3D images. Direct view from the south side. Again, really just about celebrating that brick and kind of the original facade as much as possible. And I can't quite articulate all the richness that brick really conveys from the in real life with the detailing and all the mortar joint raking and the ins and outs of it. But really that's what this facade's all about. And just the windows kind of standing in contrast to it a little bit, complementing it as much as possible. You see the fence in the foreground too, matching the fence height of the neighbors. Another view from Driggs and Fillmore. You see the bulkhead in the distance there, solar canopy. As you increase your viewing angle from it, a little bit more glimpse of the solar canopy there. There's been some discussion about color of that up there, based on the community feedback from the local board. We've decided to go with a dark color there, just to kind of as it felt that it's more muted, also better for just absorbing the sun rather than reflecting it. Another view from Fillmore East, close here. And this is the neighbor in the background, 66-1 Driggs Ave, which is a 7-story building. So there's a lot of bulk visible because of that 1-story neighbor to us, and because the building's so tall. there's a lot of bulk visible from Fillmore. So it kind of just becomes a, composition with the bulkhead up there at the roof. As you head east on Fillmore towards the more, where the row housing is, the row housing starts to hide some of the view of the bulkhead, and that viewing angle is relatively short in terms of the length on the street where it's actually visible. Just comparing this back to our the image that we do have here from 1940, you see that the bulkhead is relatively in the same position and same size as the original as it originally stood. And that's the last slide. That's the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicants? Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. So the first person that we have signed up is Helen Freeman. Helen, I'll be moving you into the meeting as a panelist. And you should be able to unmute your line. If you could please state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Helen Freeman from Historic Districts Council. HDC is generally supportive of this proposal. However, 2 items are of concern to us. First, we do not think that the glass guardrail is appropriate in this particular application. It is too visible and reflective. We believe a black steel system and some sort of handsomely designed wire mesh would be more appropriate and a better functioning solution. Second, HDC is unclear whether the applicant is restoring the corbelled brick cornice on this building. We would ask LPC to confirm that the full street-facing facade is to be properly restored and all of its modest but wonderful details maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Christina Conroy. And I'll be promoting you to panelist shortly. And you should be able to unmute your line. If you could please state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society in New York. Now, we're happy to support the restoration of this building. We hope the work includes the removal of the metal canopy above the first floor. The presentation materials aren't clear on this. The presentation also doesn't provide information about the visibility of the new rooftop bulkhead, though we think it appropriate even if visible over the side walls. We recommend, however, that the rooftop canopy can be lowered or pulled back so that it isn't visible from the front. As designed, it will form a very visible hard edge with a deep shadow above the facade. Also, we find the glass railing to be wrong for a simple building such as this. A simple metal or tension wire railing, even if visible, would be better. Finally, the windows appear to have been 1/1 in the tax photo. Single-light windows are wrong for a colonial revival style building. Replacements should be stylistically correct. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I do not see any other hands raised. We don't have any other signups. So I'll just note that Brooklyn Community Board 1 recommends approval, though noted some reservations about the choice of single pane windows, the size of the canopy on the bulkhead, glass guardrail, and the color of the bulkhead.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to these comments. And also if you can just answer the question raised by the Historic District Council about the brickwork.
Yeah, regarding the brickwork, I think the specific point was about the stone lintel cap. Absolutely are intending to replace that. The current cap's not in such good condition, so it'll be replaced with a lintel that matches the historic one, which we have a physical sample of. So that'll be somewhat easy to do. And then yes, for all the brickwork, essentially matching or restoring all the existing brickwork and the stone lintels. The awning will be removed. And the comment about the bulkhead casting the facade in shadow is not totally true because it's stepped back 15 feet. Although there's still the canopy to consider. It's just not shading the front facade. No.
I would also like to add that from the community board, we originally had the bulkhead as a lighter color to match the side stucco. We actually changed it based on their proposal and approval, as Andre mentioned in the presentation, to be more of that charcoal color that kind of melds together with the canopy.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I do see, sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
Sarah. There is someone else with their hand up.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so Lisa Steiner, I'll be promoting you to panelist. Lisa Steiner, your line should be able to be unmuted.
Can you
If
hear
you
me
could state,
now?
yes, can you state your name for the record, please?
Lisa
You'll have 3 minutes to
Steiner.
speak.
This would be the only bulkhead on the block. I really don't feel like it suits the block to have this. I own a property there. I've lived there for 22 years and I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the glass and I don't feel like it should be. This block should have that design because it'll set a precedent for all the houses.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I don't know if the applicants would like to also respond to those comments that we just heard about the context of the block. I think this is sort of unique in its typology and maybe therefore somewhat unique in the visibility of the bulkhead, but do you want to address that?
I think the only thing to add is that we have a precedence on this building for a bulkhead. And so that's something also that, makes us a little bit of a unique case.
Yeah, our core mandate was really to restore the property and using the tax map 1940s image as our North Star. And on that image, there was an existing bulkhead. And we see elements of that in the actual parapet wall of the existing structure, where you can see the outline of an older bulkhead. So that was our kind of North Star in adding that to the design.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, if there are no final questions, I'm going to send you all requests to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. All right. Oops. And
We have a motion to
yes,
close the hearing.
I'm going to do that, John. All right, Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this includes restoration, which technically can be done at staff level of the masonry, but it also includes, and what we're looking at are new windows and doors on the facade, and the rooftop addition, bulkhead, and other elements that, including the glass railing and the canopy for the solar panels. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you start this one?
Sure. This is a lovely project. And I want to thank the applicant for, making sure they're working on the details and restoring it, the building. It'll be a lovely addition to the landscape. I just I want to make a couple of recommendations, and many of them have already been suggested by the community members who have spoken. So I do agree that the building should, as they were in the past, be 1/1. The facade looks a little naked right now without that cut in the windows. I think I want to say that I think the garage door works beautifully and it's a wonderful accent. I do not have a problem with the visibility of the bulkhead from the side, but I do think something needs to happen with the awning. It either needs to be made shorter or be eliminated. I also think that railing, the glass railing, doesn't make sense. It should be something that's more appropriate to this building, and they can work with staff on that. But I also think it needs to be set back from a visibility standpoint. And I think, I think they had addressed the corbelled cornice question. And I just think they need to continue to work with staff on the details, but overall it's a very good project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, this is a wonderful little jewel box of a project. And the comments that were said previously I agree with. The ones that I would make would be the color of the lintel. A dark brown seems kind of odd to me. And I think the solar panels should be put on the bulkhead, eliminating eliminating the awning. And the awning is a different element. It's not a volume, it's a plane. So if he puts it on the bulkhead and still have the skylights, I think he could get enough solar gain from that. So bulkhead. And the entry door, there was some comment somewhere I read about the entry door, the bottom piece should be higher. And I would agree with that, but those are my comments. There's 3 comments on it.
Okay, and you agree with Commissioner Lutfi on the windows?
Oh, yes, yeah, obviously.
And any thoughts on the rooftop glass railing?
Glass railing is strange for me because, when I'm on a roof and there's a glass railing, I love it. Right? But I understand in the context how it changed. If they could push it back out of sight, or if they cannot do that, then the linear wire railings would be best.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Gustafson?
This is a rare block in the context of a much larger neighborhood in which there actually is not on this block a hodgepodge of rooftop additions and other sorts of things. And I understand this building is not the same design as the buildings a little further down the road, but it is the same massing, and it is part of that very unique clean roofline view. So I do agree with Commissioner Jefferson about the awning. I understand there was previously a bulkhead there, and I think they're representing that the bulkhead, he did actually say, I think the applicant, that it is the same size as the original bulkhead. And if that is true, I'm okay with that. But I think the awning has to go. And it, this view tells you, it does upset that roof line in a very odd and very sharp sort of way. The glass guardrail, I think, is too visible. Maybe it needs to be another material. Maybe it needs to move back. I'm okay with either of those. The windows, I agree with Commissioner Lutfi. Those should be 1/1s. And I think I've covered all of the comments. And I think I also agree with Commissioner Jefferson about that the bottom of the door ought to be higher.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron.
It's a great project. Lucky to have it and to do it. But I do think that there are a couple of things that the windows should have some sort of articulation. 101 is fine. I don't really have a problem at all with the bulkhead, even though I recognize that it's somewhat changes the profile on the block, but the bulkhead doesn't bother me. And neither really, when seen in front elevation, does the awning. I mean, I don't think it's great, but if it has this purpose, I think there is something light and interesting about it. It doesn't offend me. The glass handrail, as Commissioner Bland has told us and reminded us before, is never truly transparent, or even a little bit transparent. It's very much a presence and always a very much sort of emphatic design detail. It almost always reads, I think, so should not be where it is, should be either pushed back or eliminated, or I don't know, it was certainly not visible. And there is something a little bit stark and about the fence. Maybe the pickets are tight or too tight, or something about it seems to me to be a little bit heavy. And the big once garage opening is, I think, just in the rendering reads rather sort of dark and a little bit stark, but might be, I think that they can work on it with the staff to kind of to get it right, to get the lintel to read right relative to the other details. But otherwise, I think this is terrific.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think that, in general, the project is a nice project. I agree with the comments of previous commissioners about having double hung windows. I think it's unfortunate to have the canopy be able to be seen over the primary facade. So I think that should be reduced or eliminated. And as has been suggested, perhaps some of the solar panels can be relocated to the bulkhead. And on the issue of the glass railing, I do think it is going to be an issue, so that it should be a metal railing. Start working with the staff, and I don't know whether it really. I'm not as concerned about its visibility from the side, but I think that it should be the material should be changed. So that's that. Those are my comments.
The material of the bulkhead or the railing?
The railing.
The railing. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I must have, I'm clearly looking at a different project. I think it's fine as is. I really, almost. I think I start from the fact that this is an anomalous building on a very uniform block. And the uniformity is kind of the raison d'etre for the district. It's that remarkably intact block in the midst of a very heterogeneous neighborhood. That said, this building is at the heterogeneous end of the block and is itself unusual. It doesn't follow the pattern, and it's incredibly modest. It was clearly, from the 1940s anyway, and probably even before, a very, very modest utilitarian building. And I think they were lucky to get the keystones that they got budget-wise. I think it's a charming, quirky industrial building, and that kind of drives my thinking on it. I'm almost always opposed to these unarticulated windows, but here I think it works because it kind of emphasizes the anomalous quality of the building and the kind of almost shell haphazard quality of it. I think they should be sunk a little bit deeper, but I think they're fine as is. The door thing didn't bother me, but it certainly would be fine to raise it. The canopy, I think, is lovely, and it kind of it talks about the adaptive reuse of the building as now a high cost single family residence, I assume. and I think it does not detract from the building at all as presented. I think that the other comments about the the paint of the lintel over the garage door are certainly something that they can talk about with staff. But I think it's kind of nice as is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Just three things. I'd like to see the windows at 1/1. I'd like to see the panels relocated so they're not visible, and the glass railing should be not visible as well.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
I'm sort of in the camp of Michael Goldblum. I think this is a lovely little project, but I do hear what the commissioners are saying about some of the tweaking, the glass railing and, and some of the details. So I leave it to the majority, but I'm in the camp of Michael Goldblum and Adi as well in terms of that canopy.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Although the applicant architect didn't describe it this way, I'm viewing this as industrial chic and a contemporary intervention in an old building. Therefore, I can accept, as Michael Goldblum could, the windows as is. I think it's I like it the way it is. In fact, I have no other real issues with it except the glass is maybe, I guess I'm seeing it here, rendered in the way it wouldn't be seen. It's just too high. So does that mean it gets pushed back, or does that mean it gets changed out into as invisible as possible cable railing or something like that? Otherwise, I'll just round it up by saying what everybody else has said. It's a sweet little project.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we have a lot of support for this project and maybe a few things that they can work on with staff. And that would be to, I think, while some people are comfortable with the single pane windows, I think the majority of commissioners would like to see the 1/1 double hung windows. And I think they can work with the staff on the bottom rail of the detail of the door. And then at the rooftop, I think that, again, while a couple commissioners find the canopy to be an appropriate symbol representation of the adaptive reuse of the building and not detracting, I think most wanted to see it reduced or eliminated and the solar panels put on the roof. So maybe they can work with the staff on that. And then for the railing, either set the glass railing back further or do a metal cable railing. So I think with those 4 modifications, we can vote to approve it. And so why don't I go ahead and do this one too, just because I got them already written down. Okay, docket number 20, in the matter of docket number 21-10217, 7 Fillmore Place in the Fillmore Place Historic District, an altered colonial revival style garage building built in 1912. This is an application to replace windows, doors, and ironwork and construct a rooftop addition and other rooftop elements. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fillmore Place Historic District. I note that I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed folding garage door featuring metal framing and translucent privacy glazing is a modern interpretation of the historic infill and will help facilitate this building's adaptive reuse, that the placement and height of the new areaway fencing will align with fencing at the neighboring properties, supporting a unified streetscape composition, that the proposed areaway ironwork is simple in design and will not call attention to itself, that the massing and visibility of the proposed rooftop addition set back from the front facade and aligning with the rear and lot line facades will approximate the massing and visibility of the historic bulkhead, that the design and materials of the proposed rooftop addition consisting of a glazed curtain wall and dark bronze metal cladding will add a contemporary layer to the evolution of this building, that the presence of visible railings, if properly scaled and designed, will not detract from this utilitarian building, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Fillmore East Historic District. However, I recommend that the applicants continue to work in consultation with the staff to make a few revisions, including to include replacing the proposed single light windows with 1/1 double hung windows, to eliminate or reduce the canopy and put the solar panels on the roof of the bulkhead to reduce the visibility of that, and to set back the glass railing or to install a metal cable railing in lieu of the glass railing. And finally, to continue to work with the staff on the details such as the bottom rail on the door and the final details of the ironwork and garage door and its lintel. Okay, Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Sorry, aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Aye.
The vote's 10-0. The motion is approved.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so that concludes our morning session. And we will break for lunch now. We will ask all members of the public to exit the meeting voluntarily so that you don't have issues if you wish to return. We will break for a half an hour, so we will come back at 1:05. Thank you all.
Sarah, I'm